All right, everybody, come on in. Have a seat. Thanks for coming. This is political science. I am Mr. Davis. I'll be your instructor for the semester. Today, let's jump right in and get started. Today we're gonna discuss the Reconstruction Era. Now, during this time is when the freedom of the slaves, and so also a lot of things happened in this time. We've had different presidents. We've had Lincoln, Johnson, Grant. We've had a lot of different changes in the country. So I want you to pay special attention to a video we're going to watch later about this Reconstruction Era. So I want you to see if you can identify their political ideas and methods and see how they contrast each other. Because it's a real important part about that. As you can see, the EMC squared, well, that had nothing to do with this class, but, oh, thanks for coming in late. Come on in, come on in. Did you at least bring food for everybody?
Mr. Davis, you think I'm just going to walk into your classroom and not bring you food? Tam.
Popcorn, popcorn, get your popcorn. What's your popcorn, sir?
Yeah.
Come get your popcorn right now. Popcorn, popcorn, come get your popcorn.
One eternity later.
All right, now that everyone's got their popcorn, can we get back to what we're going to be studying today? We are going to be studying, like I said, the Reconstruction Era. That's about from 1865 to about 1877. A lot of stuff happened that years, on those years. Mostly the Civil War and the freedom of the slaves. We are going to, you know what, let's just watch the video. You know, instead of me standing up here talking about it, we'll just watch the video. Since you all got your popcorn, all we need now is someone to come in late and bring the sodas. Okay, but let's see if we can get this thing going. Let's see here. All right, let's see here. Let's get this video going. Let's see here. Let's see the thing. Oh, hang on. Gotta hit this thing down. Technology. Okay, come on. All right, let's see here. We got. Let's see here. Anything happening yet? Oh, these stupid things. What's going on here?
Press play.
Oh, thanks. There we go.
Session was peeking into view as the tension between the North and South built. Their views differed in politics, economy, industrial, banking, and civil morals. The North didn't agree with the slavery and the lifestyle of the South. They also had their own financial and civil interests on how to improve and change the South. The South knew that if the emancipation occurred, that they would lose their fortune and assets, so it came down to them separating from the Union. After the Civil War and devastation in the South, the country was left to rebuild itself.
The moment that Confederate General Lee surrendered to the Union, both the North and South had no clue how to address the situation next. It was an awkward situation that not even the president knew how to approach. I mean, how could you make the North trust the South again, and the South truly conform and abide by the Union's new rules? The South most likely felt resentful and like they were being suppressed. After all, they had left England for their freedom, but it seems they traded England for the North. Lincoln was gathering his advisors to discuss the best solution for unifying the nation again. However, Lincoln's tragic assassination halted any progress, while the nation had to regroup and restart under new leadership.
Lincoln's assassination occurred on April 14, 1865 at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. He was killed by a well-known Confederate and actor, John Wilkes Booth, at Ford's Theater. This led to Andrew Johnson becoming the 17th President of the United States. Before his assassination, Lincoln proposed his 10% plan, which called for only 10% of a Southern state's votes to swear an oath of allegiance to the Union in order to be readmitted into the Union. Everyone was outraged by the leniency of this plan, which led to his assassination. Johnson's main goal was restoration of the United States, but he was partial to the white man and didn't have anti-slavery sentiments.
Andrew Johnson was a very controversial and infamous president. He gained office after Lincoln's assassination. In Johnson's early years, he was raised in poverty and as a local tailor by his mother and stepfather. He had developed a white supremacist attitude due to the rich snobs and their treatment of the lower class, an idea he held all his life. He later ran from his apprentice duties and met up with his family to move to Greenville, Tennessee. Shortly after, he opened a prosperous tailoring business, then he proceeded to marry. With his wife's encouraging support, he became self-educated. Johnson's political and presidential ideals were impacted greatly because of the fact that he came from the South and also because he was a Democrat, which differed from former President Abraham Lincoln, who was a Republican. Due to his Southern ideals, once he gained some prosperity, he owned a small number of slaves. He was so set in his thoughts that he was probably the most racist president that America has ever had. He wished every head of family in the United States had one slave to take the drudgery and menial service off his family. He talks about the blacks as savages and strongly believes they should return back to work on the plantations. However, like Andrew Jackson, Johnson believed he was the voice of the common man, or the common white man. Johnson, as a whole, had this kind of off personality. He was very self-oriented and extremely stubborn. He didn't listen to or care about other people, and he didn't have very many friends. You rarely saw him smile. To many, he seemed cold and reserved. Most historians, including me, believe Johnson was the worst possible president to have at the end of the Civil War. It was his arrogance that made him lose the public support. On the contrary, he was a greatly ambitious and principled president. Nailed it!
Lincoln passed the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery. Lincoln's goals for Reconstruction were simply to get the Confederacy back into the Union, hence the leniency. Johnson believed that the South still had the rights to govern themselves as long as they abided by the 13th Amendment. Because this was such a lenient plan, South states took advantage and began creating black codes.
Johnson's leniency as a president was truly expressed when the black codes were created in the South after the 13th Amendment. Now, these were codes that the farmers and the plantation owners had created because they had just lost their labor and their assets and money when the slaves got their rights and freedom. And so they needed a way to get their labor back and keep their labor. It was a secure way, so they created black codes. And an example of some of these black codes where the labor and farm or the plantation owners would force the blacks to sign a year-long labor contract, and if they didn't sign it, they were faced with being arrested or fined, you know. And another example is if they left before their contract was over, they would either get thrown in jail or wouldn't get compensated for that time that they did have. So this is really kind of crippling and didn't allow African Americans to reach their full potential. It really went as far as in South Carolina, if they wouldn't allow African Americans to have any other jobs or occupation except being a farm worker and laborer or a servant in the home. And if they did, they were arrested or fined. It just wasn't allowed. They would be taxed anywhere from $10 to $100, and that's just upwards of money, I mean, back then. So it really crippled African Americans' true potential in this. And it really showed, you know, but in the same sense, African Americans didn't have any other, you know, they didn't have any other option if they didn't have money saved because they were newly free. They didn't know where to go or where to work, so they were just like, well, I mean, this is a secure job and thing. So it worked. The black codes kind of did work for that, and it really showed that we didn't truly, as Americans and politically didn't focus on equal prosperity until after the 14th Amendment, because this wasn't equal prosperity. They were slaves again under these black codes.
The radical Republicans were furious over the black codes because it restricted the blacks' newly won rights. Johnson, on the other hand, didn't care about the injustices and even vetoed the Civil Rights Act and renewal of the charter for the Freedmen's Bureau. His justification was that it intruded states' rights.
In 1863, the War Department created a commission to help deal with the emancipated slaves, with the people coming into the world. They created, with its one-year plan, created the Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands Bureau, which is known as the Freedmen's Bureau. The idea behind this, the Freedmen's Bureau, was Lincoln had a great idea. He wanted to set a bureau in place, temporary bureau, to help the freedmen get established in the country, in a devastated, war-torn country. The problem with it was that he did not think it through. It was a general good sense of taking care and assisting the freedmen, but it wasn't specific detailed. It wasn't specific oriented. As the Bureau functioned, trying to assist the landowners and the freedmen with labor disputes, legal issues, education, and housing, they found they needed more time and more resources. Unfortunately, with Lincoln's assassination and death, a new president, Johnson, came into play, and he was not too much of a supporter for this bureau. Yeah. Whenever the charters were up to be renewed for the bureau, he would veto them. The bureau found itself real in dire need, not only with the external powers of the political realm, but with inside itself. With the end of the Civil War coming, the need to mediate between the new freed slaves and the landowners was in great need. Not only did we have over 4 million new citizens to deal with equally and to find jobs, labor, but the agricultural needs of the South were in great despair. With the Civil War, the devastation was great, leaving plantations barren, no farmers, no work. It was, to the South, a total devastation, a total wipe.
The Freedmen's Bureau was also associated with the popular term sharecropping.
One of the biggest points about sharecropping is the ideology of the African Americans gaining their economic independence. They enjoyed the sharecropping system the best, and they felt it more closely related to their goals of gaining their own land. At the end of the war, they were in hopes and felt owed that they would finally get a piece of land for themselves, that they would be able to raise their families, stay with their family, get their families reunited, and then stay on a piece of land that was theirs, giving them some kind of independence and some kind of worth. Now, an answer to this was the sharecropping idea, which basically was families would rent small plots of land from landowners in return for a portion of the crop. When they would, at the end of the year, they would give a portion of their earnings to the landowner, which was good for the landowners because now they had someone farming their land. And for the freedmen, it was great because now they're responsible and had their own land. They actually were responsible and actually felt more independent. It was a great system. It was the most successful system of them all, but still it had its faults. Of the 4 million people that were now freedmen, only about 30,000 people were actually able to own land from this system. And that's about the mid-70s, 1870s, is when this was about the biggest success of this sharecropping. It was widely used, and it had been the most successful use. You know, it was the most successful implementation of a plan to eliminate the labor disputes. And for the most part, it was successful. Okay, hang on a little bit. Let me stop this video for a second. Turn the lights on. Lights, lights, lights. Okay. Is everybody awake? Because it seems that some of you are. You keep throwing popcorn. I thought I was having popcorn thrown at me. This is a very... this group put a lot of work in this video, and it would be considered if everybody would pay attention to what is being done up here. You might just learn something that might help you in a test around here. Got it? Lights. Turn the lights back off. Let's watch the video.
The Radicals won and they passed the 14th Amendment, which stated that citizenship should be granted to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, basically addressing slaves and expanding their rights and protection to civil justice.
In 1865, the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery was passed. In 1866, the 14th Amendment was passed. This gave those free slave citizens the right for protection under federal state law. The 15th Amendment came about in 1869 for former slaves to retain the right to vote. However, this was ratified by 1870. Well, they tried again in 1875 for better rights, for more rights, and they came up with the Civil Rights Acts. This banned racial discrimination in public places. But 2 years later, the Great Compromise, better known as the Great Betrayal, abolished the Civil Rights Acts. From 1876, what is known as the Jim Crow laws were regulated as state and local laws to the discrimination and segregation of African Americans from the white population. These laws were so contained and so restricted as to, they would put signs up throughout neighborhoods showing where colored people were allowed to walk, where they were allowed to talk, where they could drink or rest or eat. They weren't allowed to go to the same theaters as white people. They had to go to their own theaters. They were not allowed in the same places. There was segregation all over the place. There were colored signs for colored restricted people only, and signs for white people only. Segregation was everywhere. It was running rampant. It went all the way through into the Supreme Court, where they declared that the segregation of colored schools were unconstitutional. Little by little, they worked their way, and by 1868, all known forms of segregation was declared unconstitutional. By the Supreme Court in 1970, all segregation had been dissolved, finally.
Because of Johnson's reluctancy to continue what Lincoln had started, he was impeached.
After President Lincoln's assassination,
John Wilkes Booth
Johnson gained the presidency and decided to carry out this 10% plan that radical Republicans were so strongly against. Radicals felt Lincoln's plan was far too lenient and wanted to implement military governments along with strict terms for readmission into the states. With the majority of Congress favoring radical Republican views, Johnson earned a bad rep. Then, in February 1868, Johnson breached the Tenure of Office Act by removing Edwin Stanton, Secretary of War, and ally of the Radical Republican Party from office. This was someone who also bumped heads with Lincoln. However, this was not merely a political decision, but a test on the Tenure of Office Act by Johnson, which he himself felt was unconstitutional. Ultimately, this was his downfall, which led to his impeachment on February 24, 1868. Later, in 1926, the Tenure of Office Act was declared invalid.
Once the Republicans were back in office, radical Reconstruction began. From 1867 to 1876, in 1867, they passed the Reconstruction Act, which forced Southern states to ratify the 14th Amendment in order for them to be readmitted to the Union. Another influential group that affected politics was the Ku Klux Klan.
When we get into the topic of the KKK, it's number one, very brutal, but number two, if you look at this Klan from more of a political view, no matter how deranged their actions were, they were a very strong association during the Reconstruction era. supremacy around 1868 and began fading around the early 1870s. They operated as a group of political and social terrorists and worked off of a hierarchy structure. With this hierarchy scale, the Grand Wizard, or the leader of the Klan, was Nathan Bedford Forrest. Bedford played a very large role with the widespread of the Ku Klux Klan, and by the summer of 1868, the Klan had spread across Georgia. The Klan worked as an all-white supremacy, responding to the Southern blacks gaining their civil and political rights because of the emancipation, of course. The main goal was to not only scare off black voters, but to defeat the Republican Party. They achieved their political goals easier and quicker than their social goals intended. In order to gain any kind of ground, unfortunately, they had to resort to violence. Their main goal was not to only scare off black voters, but to defeat the Republican Party as well. They achieved their political goals a lot easier and quicker than their social goals intended. They, in order to gain any kind of ground, unfortunately, they had to resort to violence. The violent acts they took were anything from as small as whipping on the local blacks to who seemed disobedient in their eyes, or as large as an assassination on the Republican leaders. The Freedmen Bureaus actually reported that there was 336 cases of murder and assault to kill on the freedmen across the state from January 1st to about November 15th of 1868. Although the Klan-like groups who called themselves the Rifle Club still engaged in racial and political terrorism, but they did not amount to the original Klan because they seriously lacked the organizational ties that they needed in order to build.
During the Reconstruction era, the North believed God was on their side. The South believed God was on their side. The freed slaves believed God was on their side, and the KKK believed God was on their side.
From the time of about 1863 through 1877, religion was indeed present during the Reconstruction era, but there wasn't a huge focus on religion. Slaves were imported to the New World from Africa generally. These slaves did bring along with them their religious beliefs and practices. Unfortunately, as the slave trade broadened, it became challenging for all of the cultures to preserve their particular practices. Families were getting separated and then mixed into the masses of the different cultures. The general practices consisted of isolated rhythms, songs, movement, dances. Other religious beliefs such as Catholic or Christianity beliefs were taught to the slaves in order to conform their minds as their owners actually were. The slaves would be taught these beliefs while being supervised by a white preacher, and their owners had to be present as well. But through the preacher's eyes, they preached to the slaves to encourage them to be good Christians by respecting and serving their owners. Of course, the slaves were convinced that if they were anything but obedient to their owners, they were taking actions of the devil. Slave owners did have a deep fear that if they would allow their slaves to practice their own beliefs and their own ways, it would be an opportunity and promote the slaves to join together as one and rebel against them. With these white ways of religion forced onto the slaves, they still decided to incorporate their African beliefs still. The mixture of the two resulted in a new formation of religion called voodoo. As the northern states became non-slaves, the slave trade would come to a halt. The freed slaves relied on their African heritage practices, and these were passed down to many generations to come. Africans found patterns within their ways such as an enthusiastic, high-energy singing, clapping, dancing, spirit possession, and these practices are still in many American churches and cultures to this day.
Meanwhile, during the Reconstruction, industry and economy was booming.
President Abraham Lincoln preached to his people on April 11, 1865 of Reconstruction, which made the United States one of the top industrialized nations at the time. Cornelius Vanderbilt, who they named a university after, along with Andrew Carnegie and Leland Stanford, had a partnership with the government where each stood hand in hand The Railway Act system would have never been possible without the grants given to them by the national government. But thanks to the industrial companies, the United States made itself known for its superiority in industrialization. The North's Industrial Revolution during the Reconstruction Era in America was really ideal for the significant growth that made the United States such a significant power. The Industrial Revolution in the South began to the not-so-profound American Civil War, which left the city in ruins. The South went through a lot of changes, not only through economics but the geography as well. The war was fought in the southern states and left people there in devastation. The railroads were gone, houses were destroyed, farms which helped feed people were burned to ashes.
Well, there you have it, the Reconstruction Era by the Reconstruction Group. I hope you all enjoyed the film and learned something. Well, everybody, thanks for watching the film. Everybody pick up the popcorn after they leave, please. And, well, everybody have yourself a good week, a good semester. Mr. Davis, have a good semester. Group.
A definite need. Stop. Was. Dang it. Stop. Cut. Keep that.
Okay.
But cut. If they're free slaves, they. Okay, cut. Ending the federal Bureau's power. So what you need? Yeah?
Yeah.
Idea, which basically was families would rent small plots.
An old song that he published in the 1830s called Jump Jim Crow. Well, apparently a ridiculous song with a ridiculous title deserves to give a ridiculous law the same title, such as Jim Crow laws. Thomas Rice, sorry, let me redo that. Sorry, I lost my place for a second. Thank heaven now, segregation is gone. Yep. Okay, we can not add that part. Please don't add that part.
Okay. Action. 2 years before, oh, I looked at the camera weird. Even if 90% swear, I messed up. Even if 90 special privilege, because of this bank had strong, I totally messed up, was declared invalid.
Alright, that was good.
He's gonna hold, so I'm not.
That's perfect.
Yeah, that means slow down.
Slowly, like think of long.
Act took. The violent acts took. Oh my gosh.
Uh-oh. It's the batteries are dying on this, so.
Are they really?
Yeah.
Is it?
Already. Brownie points.
Still filming?
See, Mr. Davis? Brownie points.
You gotta get on there. This is all for you.
Brownie points. A+.
Brownie points.
Nailed it!